Greetings, everyone. This is Josh, and I have another episode of Horror Hangouts. And today, my guest is an author from England. She is the author of the book Psychic Voices. And that is my guest today, JP Alters. How are you doing, JP?
Hello. Hi, Josh. Hi, everyone. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Uh, I'm doing fine.
No.
Let's see, so you've been pretty busy because you're also working on your next book, aren't you? Or that's going to be coming out soon, won't it?
Wow. So so Psychic Voices was book one in the Mary Jameson supernatural thriller series. That's quite a mouthful.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've not too long ago released book two in the series. That's called Psychic Echoes. And I've gotten started on book three now. It will be called Psychic Feelings, but I haven't done very much. I've planned it out, and I am probably up to about chapter three, so I've got like probably about 47 chapters to go.
I I was gonna say I'm like getting ready to start chapter 12 of Psychic Voices, and then I'm still like just barely into it. But you know, uh, so what? So tell us about what Psychic Voices is about,
Oh, um,
without giving out any spoilers, of course.
yes. Well, I'll try not to give any spoilers. So, it's um, it's about a young woman who is diagnosed with schizophrenia, and she is really struggling with her mental health, so much so that she decides to take her own life. However, she's stopped in the nick of time and by the police, and they take her to a psychiatric hospital called the Rainbow Unit. Um, the Rainbow Unit is kind of like a spa, uh, like luxury spa like feel. And she really starts to come into her own there. Um, uh, she makes friends with a few of the other patients. And they're like the first friends that she's ever had in her life, because she's quite a hostile young woman, quite defensive, quite sarcastic and aggressive. Um, but we get to see more of Mary, the protagonist, and we understand, I think, why she is the way she is. Um, so her new friends, they are convinced of that something bad is happening at the Rainbow Unit, and she basically isn't sure if she should believe them, um, or even herself, because
Hmm.
when you're diagnosed with schizophrenia or a severe mental health um, illness, how can you really tell what's reality and what's not?
It,
So that's it. I'm trying really, really hard not to give
I think
away.
so. There's certainly some sort of dark element at play here that we're not quite aware of yet, or that Mary's not quite aware of, that I'm sure will reveal itself later on in the book.
That's right. And it is a supernatural thriller.
Hmm.
And so there's an underlying story there, that's going on as well, as part of it. But I think what I tried to do with book one was have it, take my time for the beginning of the story. So to give, because I was aware that it's the book one of a series,
Hmm.
I wanted the reader to have the opportunity to get to know a lot in depth about Mary, the main character. And so I have had some feedback that it's a bit of a slow burn, but then when it picks up, things sort of
Hmm.
um, go really fast. But I have taken my time to give the reader the opportunity to come to know Mary and to see her and all her glorious faults, of which there are many, as we all have.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, so how did you develop the concept for this story? Was this based on any research you've done or your own personal experience, or you just said, "Hey, I just want to do this type of story"?
Um, well, I mean, bits and bobs. You know what it's like as an author. You collect inspiration like a kind of snowball effect, don't you? Like bits from here, bits from there.
Hmm.
But I am a qualified social worker, and I have worked. I've spent an awful lot of time working with uh, people who have been diagnosed with various mental health conditions, learning disabilities, like all manner of crises. So I did work in the forensic mental health team,
Hmm.
and also in the early intervention and psychosis team. Um, so I do have some kind of personal experience. I'm not diagnosed with schizophrenia, but I have supported like quite a few people now who have that diagnosis, and so I do know a bit about the hospitals, the psychiatric units, the way the interplay between staff that there can exist. Um, and yeah, so I know quite a bit about that world. So it made things a bit easier for me. And I love, um, I love horror books. I love supernatural books and movies very much. So that that
Of
also played into it.
course.
And yeah, and sometimes I like to read just like weird articles, and so I read this one about this breakthrough in research, and that was, I would say, that was like a massive plot point piece that fit in, that you'll find out at the end, um, maybe.
Yeah. One thing I like about the book so far is the main character of Mary, and I think you know this as well as I do that, if your main character isn't relatable or interesting in any way, you're going to lose the reader for sure. And that I think applies too in movies. And one thing I've caught myself laughing out loud a few times at some of the things that she says. So I really like her dark humor and her sarcasm. So I guess my leads my next question. Do you have a particular method in when you develop your characters? Are they inspired by people you know or even by yourself when you're writing these characters?
I mean, no, I think I do have a well developed sense of humour, but I wouldn't say that I'm as hostile as Mary, the main character. Not many people are, to be honest. But I think
Yeah.
once you get into knowing your character and really into, where you want the story. For me, I plot it out, and so I know where I want each scene to go and where I want the whole character arc to go, and that helps me to kind of like just put myself, like empathize with Mary
Hmm.
and just imagine how she would react, or someone like her would react. And I know I'm her biggest fan, so I know all of her background. I know every single childhood slight that she's had, and all of her struggles, and her emotional roller coaster of a childhood and adolescence that she's been on. So, because I know her so intricately, I can predict. It's just easy for me
Hmm.
to know how she would react in different situations, I suppose.
Yeah. Have you ever found, like, you mentioned how you plot your story out, and I think most of us authors do that. At least with me, I know how I want to start it and I know how I want to end it. But you ever
Yeah.
find where the characters themselves almost take over the story a little bit and take maybe your story in a direction you didn't anticipate going in?
yeah. So I mean, I dreamt the first part,
Hmm.
and I think the last scene, I actually just dreamed. I didn't even think about them. I just dreamt them,
Wow.
and I woke up and wrote them down, and then I kind of like, ah, how am I going to get there? Like I know A and Z. How am I going to
Hmm.
get there? But it there was one thing in particular. So if I get stuck, sometimes I'll do things that don't require. I don't know if you do this as well, Josh. Things that don't require any active like brain power. So I'll go for a walk and look at the flowers, or have a shower, or chop some vegetables, or something that I'm not thinking about. Um, and I remember there was part of the end, and I just couldn't think, how the hell is she going to get out of this? How is she going to? I've written myself into a right corner here.
Hmm.
Like, how am I going to just get her out of this? And I went for this walk, and this thing came to me, and I had realised that I had already written it at the beginning already. So
Hmm.
something that I'd written already, I hadn't realised was the out. It just came to me. So sometimes you get like you get yourself out of those kind of things. Um, Other things, it's more deliberate, isn't it? Where it's like a logical
Hmm.
thing that you can just look at. Um, I'm quite a visual person. I don't know about you.
Oh yeah.
So sometimes, like, yeah,
Well, oftentimes I will, before I even write a chapter or even a scene within the chapter, I will actually visualize it in my head as if I'm watching a movie that I'm making, and I'll even go as far as, well, where I even cast the characters. Well, I could see so and so playing this character and this person playing that character as far as other actors, and that just helps me, for me anyway, move this story along because I get an idea of what it's going to look
yeah,
like, and then I'm just basically writing down what I'm seeing almost.
yeah, exactly. So that's what I was going to say. So I will also like visualize scenes in my mind as
Hmm.
exactly what I was going to say, just like I'm watching a movie. And some people have said that to me. My
Yeah, I'm
screen
here. I'm
just
here. We
took
just
the
kind of cut out a
folder.
little bit. Yeah,
Sorry about that. Yeah, so
that's all right.
so I do the same. And so I don't know, that kind of is like the characters writing themselves. I suppose it's like a continuation, isn't it, of the whole thing in your mind, like just the creative process just flows, all of it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Um, so where did your love of writing begin?
Oh, I was very small. So so my love of reading came first. I was really young. Um, my parents said I learned to read and write when I was really, really young. And I just used to devour books like every day for years and years when I was small. Um, and I don't remember when I started to write, but I remember when I was in primary school that I won a poetry contest. And so I don't think I could have been over like 7 or 8 years old. So
Hmm.
I know that I was writing from a really young age, and I used to always scribble down thoughts, diary, writing. And I remember in my one of my diaries, it wasn't really a diary; it was just a long story. I suppose, yeah. And then I used to write short stories as a teenager, and loads of angsty poems as a teenager, because we all probably do
Oh
that.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, all. it's a lifelong thing. I would say that when I had my children, so when I was 28 when I had my first baby, and I think just being caught up with motherhood
Mm-hmm.
and raising the kids and then studying and working and everything took all of my creative energy, and I didn't write, actually didn't even read for a really, really long time, many years. And then once things got back on a more even keel, I started to get interested again. And I think it was 2019 or 2020 when I started to write in earnest, and I decided I was going to write a book. So 4 years ago now.
Yeah, it's always a big step to take too when you find it's like, you know what, I'm gonna finally write a book and just seeing where it goes from there. If you like, since you've been writing when you first started your first book, is there anything you've learned about yourself through this process that maybe you didn't weren't aware of?
Um, that I, well, my first book I didn't actually publish. So
Mm-hmm.
the first book that I wrote, I went through the editing process and everything, properly, and I did. It was a steep learning curve. Like I learned so much because I joined a writing group, Jericho Writers.
Mm-hmm.
I joined them to learn about the craft more.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just started to listen to um, loads of writers' podcasts on Spotify. So, Writers Inc. And Self Publishing Show, Formula, and uh, just anything that I could find really. Um, and then, so I wrote this. It was an what did they call it? So it wasn't a memoir. It it wasn't like an autobiographical novel. So it was kind of based on my life, but it was still fictional. It was a novel.
Okay.
So I wrote that, and in the process of writing it, I realised that um, some of it was too close to real life, and my parents would literally just kill me. Um, but also that it was quite a cathartic experience. So the writing, um, even though it was meant to be like sort of an autobiographical novel, it was creative, but it was also a very logical, systematic process. And I quite enjoyed that. And I found it helpful to see the natural progression between the
Mm-hmm.
main character's life journey, and then see the like a parallel in my own life story. So I enjoyed that symmetry, if you like, and creating that symmetry. But I decided that's not the book that I was going to publish as my first book, or even just publish it at all. So I've shelved that for good.
Mm-hmm.
But it was fantastic practice for me. And I just realised that I really loved to write still, and I love to write in a more professional manner,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to create something, because you can still love writing and not publish your book. If you just love writing, you can just write for yourself, can't you? But I loved writing, but I
Mm-hmm.
loved writing for someone else's pleasure. Like I love the idea of someone else reading what I've written, and they get what I'm trying to say and the message I'm trying to deliver in the story. And just the fact that they've enjoyed it is like the whole world. When
Mm-hmm.
someone says, "Oh, I love your book," it's like your heart just melts. You're so happy for so long afterwards, aren't you?
Oh yeah, and I kind of had a similar thing when I first decided to start writing. I kind My first book was something that I never intended to publish, and I still probably won't. It was just kind of
Yeah.
like a fan fiction story, but I did it to for practice, just to kind of practice and just to see if it's something that I was going to like doing, and I found out that it was, and that's when I decided to move on and write something original. And here
Hmm.
I am getting ready to get my second book out here before too long.
Oh,
But
well done, Josh.
no, thank you. So obviously we're both like in the horror genre.
Hmm.
Where do you think your love of horror began?
Oh, I know. Stephen King.
Mm-hmm.
Although my sister, if you're watching this, Caroline, you're warped. But she let me watch when I was very small a horror film on TV. She babysat me once, and it was called Halloween. You know, with Jamie Lee Curtis.
Mm-hmm.
I
I
was
know.
very small.
I've heard of it.
I was petrified. I was so scared. She went to sleep.
Uh,
Abuse. Oh dear. But I think that was kind of like a trial by fire.
mm-hmm.
The interest was there after that. And so I got hooked on what was my first Stephen King book? Um, was it Carrie? May have been. I just used to love Stephen King so much. And then obviously went on to Dean Koontz as well. There was Richard Lehman, Clive Barker, uh, Graham Masterton as well. I used to just love the horror. Oh, and I used to love those point horror books. Do you remember those?
uh,
Like teenage, um, like teenagery horror books.
I don't think I ever got into those. I was kind
Oh,
of a late bloomer too when I started really reading fiction, and then I got away from it. And it wasn't really until I started writing that I started reading horror fiction again. And
oh. Who
so
do
I got
you
like
like?
uh Clive Barker's probably the reason why when I finally sat down and read Hellbound Heart, that pretty much because I was already a big fan of the Hellraiser movies. So when I read
Hmm.
the book, that pretty
Yeah.
much inspired me to start writing. But I like King is there's some books I like of him, but with his books, it's sometimes hard to follow because he'll go into so many different things. Um, but and like I
Yeah.
said, there's some other indie. Like I said, I've just now started reading your book, and so far I like what I've read. And there's a lot of other indie authors that I could name, and some of whom I've had on the channel and will have on the channel soon that I'm big fans of, and I hope that you and all of them and hopefully me get the recognition we all deserve, and
Yeah.
hopefully a studio comes calling on you and say, "Hey, you know what? We want to adapt your book into a movie. Wouldn't that be fun?" But
Wouldn't that be fun?
oh yeah,
Very much. Yeah. I love I love vampire movies as well. I love zombie stories and apocalyptic stories as well. Um, so yeah, I think that was they were my favourites, and I will watch. I mean, I used to be just fearless. Now
hmm
I'm such a wuss compared to what I used to be. Like I would read and watch I'd watch any film by myself anytime.
hmm
No problem. Um, Although I did watch Smile at the cinema by myself, and I think,
okay.
yeah, so that's quite hardcore, isn't it?
Mm,
What?
depends. I think we all have our thresholds of what we consider
Very
hardcore or
jumpy.
not. Yeah, the only time I ever really jumped in a movie a little bit was the first It movie that came out in
Oh yeah.
2017.
Mhm.
That's the first. There were a couple of scenes that did make me jump, and we actually talked about this on my channel a few weeks ago when we were having a Stephen King discussion. And but outside of that, it takes a lot to get me jumped or get me a little bit disturbed. There's a movie. I don't know if you ever seen the Italian horror film The Beyond. Um, direct
Mm,
came out 1980,
I don't think
1981.
so. I may have seen it. I'm not very good with names, to be honest.
Right. But there's a scene regarding a tarantula or a army of tarantulas that will really make you cringe. And it just
Mm.
happens for no reason, which is typical of some of those Italian horror films. Sometimes something will just happen for no explicable reason other than just to have it on there.
They're like, oh, this is the stuff of nightmares. There you go.
Hmm. I don't know if you ever seen Suspiria, the original one, but that's one that might kind of throw you for a loop from time to time.
Oh, well, I'll be making a little note when we finish, so I don't forget. You can send me some recommendations.
Okay. Yeah, that's something I've never watched a whole lot of the giallo genre or Italian horror up until this year, and I've been watching a lot of it to the point to where I've kind of like put newer movies off to the shelf for right now, and I'm like,
Mm.
wow, those guys, these filmmakers, Fulci, Argento, Bava, they didn't mess around. They didn't hold back on anything. Um, but
They were there for effect.
Oh yeah, but they do it in a way that where the scenes are so disturbing, it's almost has an artistic value to it. If
Mm.
as as morbid as that sounds, they kind of treat it like artwork
Yeah.
almost on the screen, and the way they use their colors and all that. Sometimes red is a very dominant color, or
Oh
a
yeah, I like when
green,
they
or a
do
blue, or
that. Hmm.
it's really interesting. Really, I mean, just from even if you're not a horror fan, just to stand back and look from a filmmaking process,
Hmm.
it's kind of interesting to look at because I couldn't make it. That's why I'm a writer. I wanted to. I wanted to contribute something to horror.
Hmm.
Well, I don't know anything about making movies. I'm too old to start acting, so I'll just write. Just go from there.
Yeah, it's true. Pass that love on.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it is fun. Yeah, I've found writing to be kind of almost therapeutic in a way. I don't know if you do as well as just taking yourself into another world.
Yeah, for sure. It's like magical. Sometimes I'm like it's kind of like my nice treat to myself. So I might be having a really hard day at work and stuff, and
Hmm.
I think, oh, I've got this to do, that to do. Oh, but I've got 2 hours then, and I can sit down and write. And
Hmm.
also sometimes I might think um like, oh, I haven't watched a really good vampire movie for a long while. Maybe I can write one.
Well,
And then
that's what I just finished writing one, so
did you?
yeah, it,
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I'll
yeah.
have a
I'm a
read.
big vampire for the most part. Most vampire movies I'm a big fan of, and the stories.
Blade.
So
Do you
Blade
like
is good. I'm like drawn to a lot of
you
the
like Dracula?
1960s and 70s, like vampire movies made mainly by Hammer Studios. You know, those old Dracula movies with Christopher
Christopher
Lee.
Lee and
Yeah.
Vincent Price.
Peter
Yes, I used
Cushing
to
and
like those too.
yeah.
Yeah, they were good. They were good. So is it of that? Is your book kind of like that?
It's kind of like there's a lot of eroticism in this. I decided to
Hmm.
kind of blend horror with that. So like some of those early 70s movies like Vampire Lovers,
Hmm.
which is a Hammer film, uh, some of Anne Rice's work, which
Oh
oftentimes
yes. Yeah.
um, goes into it. What it was is when I was just starting out, I was part of this like website or this social media group that was mainly for amateur authors, just to kind of show their, publish, show their stories so people can critique, offer suggestions and all that.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the one of the other writers that would comment on my story, I thought, well, she's reading mine and offer me feedback. I'm going to do the same. And she was into writing erotic fiction. And as I'm writing it or reading her stuff, I'm thinking, why don't I? Obviously, it's been done before, but that's a good idea. Maybe for my next story, I'm going to blend that in.
Hmm.
And what with horror, and what better vampires are like perfect for that type of
Most
thing. So that's
definitely.
what I kind of did with this one. So it's kind of weird writing some of those scenes though, because that's it's like, because I like read it, I'm like, wow, people are actually allowed to write this. I didn't know. I'd never read anything like that.
Uh, well, it does go hand in hand with vampires for some reason. They seem to hold like a real, like a seductive power. They're all
Mm-hmm.
about seduction, aren't they? Vampires. And also kind of, yeah, like the lure of the forbidden, and
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, they're always there's always some kind of romance in the more popular vampire movies and books, I think.
Well, and even like the earlier old movies, because I got started on watching those old Universal monster movies from the 30s. But if you and I didn't notice them at the time when I was a kid, but when I go back and watch a movie like even Dracula with Bela Lugosi,
Yeah.
you have to look for it. But there's certainly some, I guess, sexual tension in that movie, and
Hmm.
especially the sequel, Dracula's Daughter. There's a lot of that too, and that's insinuated in that movie for what they were able to do back in 1934 or whatever. It's kind of remarkable. And then of course the 60s came along and the 70s, and you were able to show a lot more than you could
Yeah.
back then.
Mm. It did change everything. What did they do in the 30s? They showed some ankles.
Yeah.
Woo!
I had actually watched not to get off subject, but I'd watched a documentary on Amazon Prime, and for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it, but it was about history of nudity in cinema.
Hmm.
And actually, there were actually quite a few mainstream movies in the 20s and 30s that would occasionally go that route. And then finally, whomever, the moralist groups got mad at that, and they, of course, wouldn't do that until, because the thing about the 1960s, that's when you've got the
Like free love
counterculture,
and
yeah,
yes.
the sexual revolution, and that
Hmm.
became more prevalent. And that's when they started coming up with, I know the ratings in England and the United States are a little bit different, but they're kind of constructed the same way. And that's what
Mm.
that came about. So it's kind of a fascinating thing to
Hmm.
watch to
That's
see how that is.
interesting. That's surprising. About 1920s, 19. Very
Hmm.
surprising.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought so too. I had no idea that was the case, but yeah, there were a few movies that would do that. I think some of them now, if you go back to watch them, they've probably have cut some of that out because they probably had to
Mm.
do that back then to get them reshown or whatever. But
Yeah,
I think even like
probably.
Creature of the Black Lagoon had something like that in that movie that they cut out.
When was that made? Do you know?
1940s, I think.
Was it that long ago?
Or maybe it was early 50s. It might have been the early 50s now, because I'm like trying to
Mm.
rack my brain on that one there. But it came on the tail end of Universal's, street, their big, from 1931 to the early 50s is when they were kind of like the kings of horror.
Mm. Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I'm a bit of a history buff anyway, so hence why some of my stories take place in different times during
Yeah.
history. I kind of like doing that.
I
So,
was going to say, I bet that's real fun to do, actually. There's a lot of details that you would have had to, like, I'm probably too lazy to do that because I would probably too lazy to do the excess world building, like the research that would entail.
well, you know, in my case, the first book I wrote was a horror western, so it takes place, post Civil War Texas,
Yeah.
and I've watched enough westerns in my time where I have a general idea on how people talked and how
Yes.
they
Yeah.
lived
Yeah.
back then,
Hmm.
to kind of wing it, I guess you could say. And granted, I had to do some research because there's references to the Civil War and
Hmm.
certain things that happened during there. So I had to kind of like go back and check my dates and see when that exactly happened to
Yeah.
see if it fits in with the story. And even the next book, there's times where the story takes place in Scotland. Sometimes there's another tale, it takes place in Romania,
Hmm.
New Orleans. So I'm like juggling, I had to juggle around and do a little just some brief research just to see what times were like during a particular period of time.
That can be I quite enjoy the challenge of that. That tie-in between, and when you're writing in a series,
Hmm.
that tie-in between some small details, that you leave like breadcrumbs in book one, in the previous book,
Hmm.
because in your mind, book five, this something needs to happen, and so you leave all the breadcrumbs, but you have to make sure you're keeping all those kind of timelines
Hmm.
correct, and that there's that continuity there. I quite enjoy that. That's fun. I like
Yeah,
it.
because I had to like write notes to myself because when I was like, because the way my books separate into what I call seven tales, because it's called Tales of Castle Vasile, and each tale they're separate, but they're all connected to one another. So it's telling one overarching story.
Hmm.
And I had to make notes because, oh, what happened in that book? Just to make sure I got the age of this character correct. Because you're dealing with vampires, so they're obviously ageless until they
Yeah,
get actually killed. So I had to
yeah.
remember when did I say that person was born? I better double check my notes here. That way someone doesn't call me on and goes, "Hey, you said this person should 200 years old. They should really be 300." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's right."
I know. It's so. I mean, sometimes people do call you out on stuff, don't they? What I, I for some reason had this thing where I had to just keep checking this particular hairstyle. One of my characters. One of my characters said, I kept thinking, wait, did I say braids? Did I say afro? What one was it? And then I had to keep going back and back. And then I started to get confused with, I don't know if you're like me and you have on your computer like the full version, edited, full version, uh, but it all starts to look the same and you can't remember which is the real one the final one, the final.
I did used to do that, and what I found myself doing is as I went, I got my whatever first draft, and then I go to the second draft. When I finish my second draft, I delete the first draft so I don't get confused with stuff and just kind of work from there. I always like leave the previous draft open, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. Well, I've started to save the final version on my USB stick so that
Hmm.
I know um, that's the one. That's the one. Don't look at
Give
any
me
other
one,
one.
give me 1 second. I gotta let my cat out of the
Yeah, no
room.
worries.
She's getting, or actually, she wanted in. So
What's your cat's name?
this we got three cats and three dogs. This cat's Bonnie, and she's like 16 years old now. So she's like the
Oh.
old grumpy one, but she's in good health. So I mean, we got her shortly after my wife and I got married, and before we had our first kid. So she's been with us really
Mm,
since the beginning almost.
that's nice. Well, I've got two cats and two dogs, so they're, we are also a full household of
Hmm.
children and animals. Yeah, lovely.
Yeah. Sometimes, sometimes like, because my wife still wants to get more pets. I'm like, no, no more. She wants to get a,
Oh,
she wants to get a goat next. No,
a
I
goat?
swear I have to. Yeah, a goat. She goes, well,
Really? Do you have a farm or something?
no, that's the point. But my wife thinks we do. So we just live in a regular neighborhood, and like, no,
Are
goat.
you allowed to do that? Do you? I don't know. I've never known anyone who has a goat.
Well, there are people that do have goats, but I don't. I think my wife's just
You don't
joking,
want
but
one.
No,
Oh.
they can tear up your yard big time. Not that my yard's in that great of shape, but I don't need it adding to it. Plus, I don't know how the dogs will react to a goat.
Oh,
They'll
maybe
either think it.
if you got it when it was really small,
Mm-hmm.
they might be okay.
Possibly. Of course, I have cats that think they're dogs and dogs that think they're cats.
Oh,
So
maybe the goat will think it's a dog or cat.
probably and try and bark
Who will
instead of
win?
doing anything. Yeah.
Who will win? Who knows?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not even sure how that would work. So yeah. So so do you have like you mentioned Halloween, being one of the early movies. Do you have like an absolute favorite movie or series that you like?
I do like Halloween. I don't like all of the Halloween films. Um, I like the ones with Jamie Lee Curtis in actually, but I don't know. Poltergeist used to be my favourite. Um, there's too there are too many. There are too
Oh, there's
many.
a ton of them.
Yeah. Do you remember Cable?
God, I've heard of it, but I don't think I ever saw that
Yes.
one.
So that's a Clive Barker. But was
Oh,
the book?
Cabell.
Yes. Was the book called Nightbreed or was the film called Nightbreed? I don't
The
remember
movie
which
was
one.
called Nightbreed, but was based off his novel
Okay.
Cabell, and
Oh, it's Cabell, is it?
yeah, but
Oh, I
the
just call it Cable.
close enough. As soon as you mentioned
Yeah.
Clive Barker, oh, I know what she's talking about. Cabell. Yeah, I've
Oh,
seen the movie. I haven't read the book though.
oh
The
yeah. That used to be a favourite. I haven't watched it in a long time. I used to love um, The Shining and Firestarter. Um, although I I would say those are ones I used to love.
hmm
I'm and I'm not too keen on the remake of Firestarter either.
I
I
haven't
like the
even seen
first
the
one
remake.
more.
Yeah.
Oh, I like the first one more for definite with Drew Barrymore. Oh, she's so cute. Um, I don't know. Like I said, I like the zombie movies, but I'm a little bit of a sucker for a happy ending, and
hmm
quite often the zombie movies don't have happy endings like the older ones, do they?
Kind of depends. I mean, you have to remember with horror, it's never going to be, even if your main protagonist survives, there's always going to be collateral damage. So
Oh
they
yes.
themselves are always going to be damaged at the end, which is kind of the point.
Yeah.
But, I'm kind of like, it's not that I need the protagonist to always survive at the end. It just depends on whether or not they earned it or not, or whether they're just surviving for the sake of surviving the story, which I'm
Mm.
seeing more and more with newer, at least with newer movies. And maybe it's because I'm getting older. So I have
Mhm.
a hard time relating to younger characters to where
Do
I
you
get,
know that's true actually?
where I've gotten to
Um,
the point. I watched, I watched the movie Talk to Me last night. I don't know
oh
if
yeah,
you've
I've
seen that.
seen that.
And I'm like, I hope everyone in this movie dies. I was.
You did.
I found every
Kill
character.
them all.
I like the movie itself, and I like the concept of it. It's very well written, well
Mm,
made.
I
But I
thought
found
so.
every character to be insufferable, and I'm like, kill them all, please.
And do it quickly. No, I like that movie actually,
hmm
but I probably didn't really like the ending. I
Yeah,
didn't
the
want
very
them all
ending
to
was
die.
like, do you think as a writer, because I find myself doing this, I think even before I started writing, I'll see certain things in the story while watching a movie and goes, that's just plain dumb. Why did they make that decision? Do you find yourself doing that, using our
Yeah,
writer's brain, I think?
yeah. I was watching Smile yesterday. You know that I've seen it before, but I was watching it with a friend yesterday, and when she was in the psychiatrist was in the room with someone who was clearly psychotic, and
Mm-hmm.
she pulled up a chair to sit really close to this person. No, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? And she sat the other side of him so that he was near the door, and she was far away from the door. No, that doesn't make any sense, because if something
Right.
happens, she can't get out of the room. That would, and I was like, that wouldn't have happened. That doesn't make any sense. But I like that film. But I did think
Right.
it doesn't make any sense. And at the end of that film, I was like, right, that's it. She deserves it.
And I realize with these movies we have to suspend our beliefs a little bit, but there's some times where I think they're testing my ability to believe only so much. So
Yeah,
every once in a
yeah.
while you run into that, and normally I can overlook it if the rest of the movie is pretty solid and it's hitting on all of its marks that I want out of a movie. But yeah,
And it's hard to do. It's the common sense thing, isn't it? And
mm-hmm,
the why would they do that kind of rule? Like, I had this situation in book 2, and my editor said to me, um, but why couldn't she just get help though? That doesn't make sense. And I thought about it, and I had to like rewrite so much so that it
mm-hmm,
did make sense, but it made me think, and it made the story deeper because it made sense to me. It
mm-hmm,
made sense. And so if it made sense to me and the editor, then I knew it would make sense to the reader, because if I hadn't have done that, the end of that story, they would have
mm-hmm.
gone, well, that's stupid. That's stupid, JP. That, like, that doesn't make sense. Yeah,
Yeah, it
it is.
happens.
It does.
Things you learn. I mean, I think as a writer, we're always constantly learning on how to be better or how to do this a little bit differently. I don't think it's ever a thing anyone actually masters. Even Stephen King himself probably will. Probably, I imagine he probably will look back at one of his books. And goes, "Yeah, I should have written that a little bit different or whatever." I'm sure
Yeah,
he does. He might not admit it, but
yeah. Well, I was listening to one of his books on Audible. What was it? Oh, it was The Stand.
hmm
And he had, I got the version. There was a version on Audible that included all the like cuts.
okay,
So he had put basically a draft, like a before it was edited, a pre-cut version that was on Audible. So I was listening to that, um, and that was quite different. The story was still exactly the same. There wasn't
hmm
any, but it did have a really different feel with those cuts put back in, I think.
right.
Um, but yeah, it was just more really detailed. So he'd done that, I think. I mean, in some ways, the fact that he'd even kept that version and wanted to do that,
hmm
um, maybe that would indicate that that's true, and that we all sort of have that thing where we want to rewrite in some ways, or you like the first original version a bit more
hmm
than the one you publish, maybe.
Oh yeah, I'm sure it happens,
Mm.
and I'm sure. I mean, there's already something from my first book I looked at, and it's just a little thing, but I'm thinking, I kind of painted myself in a corner. So if I ever wanted to go back and go off that story, maybe not necessarily a sequel, I'm gonna have to explain something in order for me to
Yes.
go in another direction now, because
Hmm.
way my books are, they're as right now. I mean, there are obviously two totally different subgenres of horror, but there is a little wink and a nod to my previous book just to let the reader know that they're in the same universe. So
Hmm.
that opens up for things for me to bring this character. If I wanted to bring a character from this book and character from that story and put them together in another story, I can, which
Oh,
I think
that's
is kind of a
cool, Josh.
yeah. And when I wrote the first one, I didn't plan on that. And then I'm thinking, well, that would be kind of a cool thing to do. But now in order to do that, I'm going to have to explain why this person now all of a sudden is able to have kids where before she wasn't. It's one of those things.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. In the so the psychic voices was
Hmm.
originally called a psychic subterfuge.
Hmm.
So that was and um I after I released it as a psychic subterfuge, like I got some feedback where people were confused at the title, like
Hmm.
they were saying it doesn't really say what the story's about to them. And it was just confusing. They weren't expecting it to be what it was what it was about.
Hmm.
And so I don't want to, like our job is not to my job is not to like mislead readers
Right.
or disappoint anyone, God forbid. So I thought I would reimagine the book. So the story is just sort of tightened up a bit, of a psychic subterfuge. I tightened it up a bit and I got a new cover and I renamed it to Psychic Voices.
Hmm.
And now all the books in the series will be psychic something.
Right.
Um,
How many books do you think you'll be writing in that series, or do you even know?
well, I've got planned out 5
Okay.
so far. So I'm on book 3 and I've got 5 planned. But even in my head, um, the other morning I woke up thinking about books. Like I was thinking about a storyline. I was thinking, oh, maybe that can go in book 7 or 8. So I, who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? The only thing is, you don't. I work 2 jobs, like day jobs, and I've got 3 kids. And well, I say kids, they're like adults.
Yeah, mine are both teenagers.
Yeah. So I'm, like life is busy.
Hmm.
Um, so I've got this series that I really want to write, but also I've got like a massive long list in notes on my iPhone. Have you got that? Like you can just scroll of these story ideas.
You
Um,
know what I do, and I don't know if anything will ever come of it. Whenever I have a weird dream and I wake up in
mhm.
the middle of the night from it, I automatically grab my phone and just write
I
type
do
out
the
what it was
same.
about. Because sometimes you forget about it, and
Yeah.
I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe someday I'll go back and look at that and think, that might be, even if it's not a full novel or novella, I could make a series of like short stories out of it or something
Mhm.
along those lines. I don't even
Yeah.
know if it'll be horror. It might end up being more like humorous than anything, but
No, I do the same, but I regularly will look at those notes
hmm.
and see. And yeah, I write down my dreams when I've had a good one because I dream um, like a movie,
Hmm.
like I'm watching a movie. Do you?
I dream so. Of course, they say you most time you forget 90% of the dreams that you have. Um, a little bit. Sometimes it does it because I sometimes have the one dream. I don't know if you remember the movie Predator with Arnold
Yes.
Schwarzenegger back.
Hmm.
That's the only thing that will ever give me any type of nightmares is being chased through the jungle by the Predator. I'm Michael, Jason, Pinhead, Freddy, not a problem. I've
I
never
don't
had
know.
a nightmare
Pinhead's
about
quite
any of them.
scary though.
What was that?
Pinhead's quite scary.
He's my favorite. So yeah, I mean
Oh,
that's my favorite movie is Hellraiser, but as far as horror goes, but yeah, but the Predator on the other hand, that's just something that just gets to me, which is weird, but that's the
yeah.
only one that'll give
Well,
me a nightmare.
we've all got our things. I got really scared and got nightmares from. Did you watch that series called Evil?
No, I didn't.
Oh, it's pretty good. It was pretty good, yeah. But I had to stop watching it at bedtime because I wasn't going to go to sleep. I was just frightened. But
Oh,
yeah,
you
it's
should see
quite good.
me and my son will sit and watch horror movies up till late at night sometimes. So
Yeah, I'll watch them, but then afterwards, I will not go to sleep.
my son was about 4 or 5 and we allowed him to watch the original Halloween, getting back to Halloween, and he
Oh
just sits there
no.
and watch. And you know what? My wife tries to get behind him to try like boo scare him, and he just looks over at my wife. Keep in mind he's 4 years old. Looks over at my wife, goes stop, and that's it, and turns his focus back to the movie, and didn't have any traumatic effects on him. So I'm like,
Oh, unlike
okay, at least
me.
yeah.
Direct contrast.
Well, not all. I mean, if you look at the first one is scary, but it's not. And the reason I let him watch it is because it's not bloody at all. That first Halloween really isn't all that graphic at all, really. Um, it's not until later in the series as they go it
Yeah.
starts getting more
A
bloodier
lot of
and more.
chasing.
Right, there's a lot of tension in it, and I guess
Hmm.
that doesn't. So like, oh, okay. Because the weird thing is, if you think about back in the, it shows you how the MPAA, at least here in the United States, is so erratic. 1976, Jaws comes out, which is
I
also
was
one of my
thinking of
favorite.
Jaws.
And that movie got a PG rating, which I don't know
Yeah,
what the equivalent is in the UK
it's
would
the
be.
same. It's the
Yeah,
same, I think. Yeah.
that came out 2 years before the original Halloween. Now Jaws has a lot more blood, a lot more gore in it than Halloween does, and Halloween got the R rating.
Hmm.
Explain the logic of that, other than the fact that, oh, I guess Halloween showed some boobs, I guess, a couple times, and maybe that's
That's
what
true.
got the R rating,
Hmm.
which
The
is, I
sister.
always find weird that you can show violence and no one will
Mm.
bat an eye, and but even especially here, show anything sexual, that's people still get their, no pun intended, get their panties in a wad over it. But you
Yeah.
know,
Oh
and
yeah,
I
yeah.
wonder with
Still
my book,
distinguished.
I'm wondering with my book, what's going to get the more? Are people going to be in uproar because of the violent imagery, or will they be more up? Get more of a stick up their ass over the sexual content. I'm just
Well, I
kind of
think
curious.
you answered your own question already, haven't you?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I have. Yeah, so it's almost like I wrote this book just to see how society. Not that I'll get tons of readers, who knows, but I'm just kind of curious what the reactions will be.
yeah, well, I think um, no matter what you write, there's always some people that really love what you write and that just really feel like an affinity
Hmm.
for it. So, and I think I'm hoping like that's what will happen for all of us. Like you'll find your like reading tribe.
Hmm.
They'll be drawn to your writing or your, maybe even your way, your the kind of things like that you put out there, and um, I suppose, yeah, we'll just find our readers tribe, and the kind of people that don't like what you write,
Probably
just
aren't going to read it anyway.
yeah, just don't read it then.
And it's not like it's going to be like, we're talking about, not misleading. There's even going to be basically a little warning thing on the back saying,
Explicit.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
which I hope will draw in more readers, because that typically stuff like that makes things more, because here in the US in the 80s they started putting warning stickers on like a lot of our heavy metal and rap albums, and all that did was
Mhm.
sell more albums for the artists. So
Yes, it's like the book banning that I hear
mhm.
that they do sometimes. I don't think they do it here in the UK, but when they ban books, they make them really popular, don't they?
Oh
Because
yeah,
everyone wants to know what's all the fuss about.
exactly, and most of the time it's nothing all that big,
Yeah,
oftentimes, but
yeah. Maybe they'd like to ban one of my books.
yeah. Yeah, please do. Yeah, try and ban it. I
And
need
then
more
maybe everyone
sales.
will need to know. Yeah, everyone will need to know what's in it.
Oh
Ooh.
yeah, what did you write in there? But
Yeah.
so,
Um,
JP, so where can we find your books at? I know they're probably available on Amazon. Are they also available in bookstores as well?
so I'm a an indie author, so self-published. So Amazon, book one is available for free on Kindle Unlimited on the Amazon store, and paperback, obviously,
Hmm.
or just regular Kindle. Book two is available more widely. So
Hmm.
I use Draft to Digital as a distributor, and Amazon for that.
Hmm.
So Draft to Digital, put it in. What is it? Uh, is it Nook, Barnes and Noble?
Oh,
Um,
okay.
there's Lulu. Um, there's a lot of availability when you use D2D, I think.
Okay. I
Um,
tried, seemed like I tried them once, but I was running into some problem trying to get something in. And I said, well, I just stuck with the Kindle Direct Publishing, which is linked to Amazon. So that's what I've
well,
been
I've done both this time for the
using.
second book, but the for the first one, because you can't have like um, it's either like the higher rate or the lower rate of royalties, isn't it? And if it's in Kindle Unlimited,
Hmm.
it's the higher rate. So you can't have it in Kindle Unlimited and widely distribute with other platforms.
Yeah.
So I have done that for the first one,
Hmm.
exclusive and with Amazon, and then the second one I've gone wide,
Hmm.
and I'm just kind of seeing, it's like a bit of an experiment at the moment because I'm still a newish author,
Hmm.
and with hardly any. No one knows me, Josh.
No one knows me. I mean, I think more people know me from the channel than they do as an author. So, but that's
Yeah,
why we're here. I'm trying to get you promoted as well for
yeah.
all 84 of my subscribers anyway. But
Oh, thank
hopefully
you.
we'll get more. But
Yeah,
it has
yeah.
grown. It's since I started doing these for my channel over the
Mhm.
last since about February, I have started to see a a very steady increase in subscribers. So that's helping, I think, a little bit.
Mm,
But
mm. Yeah, I think so. I mean, all of it is just really, I think, like I started off saying, like a snowball
hmm.
effect. As I think it's just the more time goes on, and I saw someone else was saying that a lot of indie authors kind of just give up because they don't get the fame or the kind of money that they are expecting and stuff. But in my mind, if you hang in there in the long haul, the more people will get to know you, and you keep writing and you keep producing books and
Hmm.
you keep coming out with stories, the more chance you've got that you'll stumble across that readership, and someone will tell someone. And I mean, I grew up in the 80s. I was born in like mid 70s, so
Same here.
we didn't have the internet. We just had like word of mouth, and like a landline phone if we were lucky. That's that's what we got. um, but now they've got the internet and they've got social media. Um, who's to say what there will be as a like a form of spreading, information in 2 years, 3 years? Who knows? So
Yeah.
if you if if we keep trying and we keep writing and we do it with love, like, because what's the option really is what I
Hmm.
think. I'm gonna write. I know that I will always write because I love to do it, and I
Right.
know that I want other people to read my writing and for them to enjoy it. So um I don't really see that I have an option anyway, so yeah.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it. I mean, I never got into it thinking I'm going to get famous or anything or make, you know, I mean, it'd be great. This could be my only job, but it's, that's
Yeah,
just
that's so
probably not
nice.
realistic. There's 1,000 of us out there doing the same thing, basically. But I just, did my first book meet my minimal expectations? No. Did it deter me? No. It gets a little frustrating, I will
Yeah.
admit, but you hope that you hit that one popular book, and then people will go back and read your other stuff, I guess,
Hmm.
is best we can hope for.
Yeah, it's true. I suppose lots of people I've heard saying it just backlist. Um,
Mm.
so I suppose the fact that you and I are both writing series, I think that probably is helpful. But lots of people like continuity. I suppose lots of people like standalone books as well. Um, but series do seem to be popular, don't they?
Yeah, a little bit. And mine aren't even though they're in the same universe, I don't even consider them part of the same series. Because they're basically two separate things that
Hmm.
might overlap a little bit. Because, like I said, one's a horror western, the other one's erotic horror. The next one, who knows what I end up getting into? It might be sci-fi horror, possibly.
Yeah,
Might be
yeah,
the next thing, but it'll still kind of be around there. Maybe another character will show up in this story.
yeah,
I just do that as fun as a wink to the or to the reader, saying, "Yep, you remember that character from that book? Well, they're still around." So,
yeah. So they're still in that world. It sounds like you're having fun.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
And I'm having fun doing this channel, getting to know other authors and other content creators too. I think it's a lot of fun for us because we can't next go meet at the bar or the pub tomorrow, but we at
no.
least talk, or whatever, have some fish and chips or some Texas barbecue, whatever it might be. But which I do love that, by the way. But
What, the Texas barbecue wings?
that and fish and chips, I do like that. And
Do
there's
you?
not
I'm
there's
not
not
so
really
keen
any
on
good
fish and
places
chips.
here where I live that I have to make it myself if I want it.
Oh yeah, they have a lot of fish and chips in England. We don't really. I don't know. I mean, I'm not really a lover of fish and chips because I don't really like fish. You see, so
Okay.
but um, they are popular. The shops are popular fish and chip shops.
I like what's called, and I had this at an Irish pub restaurant in Las Vegas. Well, they call it the Irish breakfast, but I've heard it sounds like the same thing as an English breakfast where you
Oh
have
yeah.
some eggs and then you have what's called, I think, blood pudding is what's known
The
as.
hell no, I'm never having that. No, that's yeah,
Not
but
bad.
yeah.
I tried it. It's not bad at all, really.
Oh,
I know it doesn't sound appetizing, but I tried a
no.
bite of it. I'm like, oh, well, that's not bad at all,
I'm
really.
in the English breakfast.
Hmm.
I suppose there's like, well, there's different versions, but I suppose you have your toast, beans, egg, sausage, bacon,
Hmm.
um, sometimes mushrooms, sometimes tomatoes, sometimes the blood pudding thing. But I think
Hmm.
that's a Scottish
Okay.
thing, the blood pudding, and is it haggis that they have?
Haggis is definitely a Scottish thing. I only know that
Yeah.
because I watched Highlander. So
I watched Highlander as well. There can be only one.
yeah, yeah. And then there's a reference to haggis in that. So
Yeah. But yeah, I think the blood pudding thing is Scottish. I don't know. I just know it. I've not eaten it.
well, we've
It's not
now
for me.
covered books, we've covered
Yeah.
movies, and now we've covered blood pudding. So
Yes. Well, it goes with the vampire theme.
yep, it does. Really does.
Yeah, that's what.
Well,
Yeah.
JP, it was great having you on today.
Thank you
I
so
will
much.
make sure to put your book links, your Amazon book links, in the video description so people can check your book out and buy that book. So get both of them. So thanks what's been,
Thank
and
you.
JP, thanks for coming on, and you have a wonderful day and or
You
wonderful
too.
evening from where you're at, and good luck on your next book.
Thanks so much, Josh. Thank you so much. Good luck with your writing as well. And speak soon.
Thank you.
Take
Yep,
care.
you too.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye, everyone.